Welcome to part 3 of our Photoshoot series. If you're new to the series, we're Daniel and Rachel, and we run a photography and filmmaking channel called Mango Street. We're taking you through our entire process of a photoshoot from start to finish. In part 1, we tackled pre-production and everything you need to know about putting together a photoshoot.
In part 2, we took you on the set of that photoshoot, and today we're taking you through the process in post-production. If you've watched our videos before, you know we don't hold back any secrets, and that's not changing today. So let's get right into it.
First, we'll quickly cover how we organize our folders. For a shoot like this, we'll create a folder with the year, the month, and the day, underscore the title of the shoot. Inside this folder, we'll create a raw folder. Then we'll create a catalog folder, and then an exports folder. We'll copy all of the raw files from our memory card into this raw folder. Once that's complete, we'll launch Lightroom. We'll create a new catalog, name it, and save it to our catalog folder we just created. We're using the most recent version of Lightroom Classic as of July 2019, which is version 8.3.1. Now we can import the files from our raw folder into Lightroom. Once that's complete, our next step is to cull the photos, which is identifying our favorite shots that we want to edit. We're going to use the P key on our keyboard to flag these photos. Now, for the vast majority of our photos, we use our own presets. But for this shoot, we want it to have a more cinematic look. Some people tend to crank up the contrast when trying to make their work appear more cinematic, but if we look at some film stills as a reference, there's a lot of detail shown in the shadows and the highlights. We'll start with one of our favorite photos from the set, this one with the ghost in the kitchen. Since the image is super dark and inside the fridge is really bright, let's start by raising the shadows to 80 and then bringing the highlights down to -70. We'll also head down to the lens corrections section and enable profile corrections. With our setup, Adobe automatically loads the right profile for our lens, and this always brightens up our image. We'll just lower the vignetting a little bit. Now let's move on to the tone curve. On the bottom left, we have the black point, which defines how dark the darkest point of our image will be. On the top right, we have the white point, which does the same, but for the whitest part of the image. We're going to start by raising the black point a little. We still want some contrast in the shadows, so we'll add another point right here and bring it down slightly. We'll add a point in the middle, and then add 2 points to lower the highlights and whites of our image. Now we'll just raise the overall exposure to brighten things up. Next, we'll head down to the bottom under the Calibration tab. Every pixel has an RGB value that defines how it looks, and making adjustments to the Calibration tab will adjust the value of every pixel. Whereas in the hue, saturation, and luminance section, only the colors in those specific hue ranges get adjusted. Think of this as a global way to adjust how colors appear in your image. We'll start with the red primary sliders, shifting the hue toward orange, and then we'll desaturate it by 10. Next, we'll slide the green primary hue over toward aqua. We'll also lower the saturation of that by 10. Then we'll just drop the blue primary hue and saturation by about 10. Now, let's fix the perspective a little with the help of the guided upright tool in the Transform tab. We'll click on the grid lines here. And now we can click and drag a line along the wall which we want straightened. And we'll do it again over on the left. As you can see, Lightroom automatically makes the necessary transformations to fix the perspective. Check out the before and after. Alright, this is looking pretty good. Over on the left-hand side where it's darker, we can zoom in and see it's a little noisy. We'll just use the graduated filter tool to drag across the dark area and increase the noise reduction slider. This way, the extra noise reduction will only affect the areas that need it most. We can copy all the settings from this photo that we want to apply to other images in our set, and go ahead and finish out the rest of the interior photos, making any photo-specific adjustments like white balance, exposure, and cropping as we move along. Now let's check out a photo from outside with the car. Let's start by pasting the settings from the first interior photo to this shot. Now, since we don't have a lot of highlights in this image, we can raise the highlight slider to bring some brightness back into the shot. We can then make some adjustments to the tone curve to lift the shadows and highlights a little more. We want these outdoor shots to feel a little moodier and grittier, so we're gonna add some dehaze to the image, followed by clarity and overall contrast. Now down in calibration, we're gonna pull the shadow tint toward green. With calibration sliders, it can help to turn them all the way up or down to see how it affects the photo, and then just dial in a more subtle adjustment. For the red primary, we're gonna pull the hue back to 20, but then increase the saturation to 20 as well. It's all about the colors here, so we really want them to be well saturated. For green primary, let's pull the hue and saturation back a little. And we'll leave the blue primary as is. Now let's head to the HSL section. Under hue, we're going to use the target adjustment tool, which is the circle icon here. Now this will adjust any colors associated with where we place our cursor. For instance, if we want to adjust this red light, we can click and drag up on it, and we can see in the hue panel, it adjusts both the red and orange hues. We could go crazy with it if we wanted to, but let's take a more subtle approach. We can also use this tool with saturation and luminance to get it looking just how we want. Now that the colors and tones are looking good, we just want to touch up the sides where it's looking pretty noisy. We'll use the adjustment brush and paint over the parts we want to fix. Let's drop the overall exposure a bit, and add a little dehaze, and then turn the noise reduction slider up. If we hit O on the keyboard, we can see our mask overlay and everything that's being adjusted by our brush. Let's tap O again to turn it off. Alright, let's just add a saturation boost to give it that extra oomph. Now, in keeping with our cinematic theme, let's give the photo a 16:9 crop so it feels a little bit more like a still frame from a movie. Okay, now that we have our raw processing complete, let's take a look at some more in-depth retouching in Photoshop. As we mentioned in part 2, since we forgot to bring a steamer to our sheet has a lot of hard wrinkles. This is where the old fix it in post adage really rings true, because this type of retouching can be super time consuming, when it could have easily been fixed on set had we had a steamer. To get this photo into Photoshop, we'll just right click on it and select Edit in Adobe Photoshop. This will create a TIFF file with our Lightroom edits and open it into Photoshop. Now, we don't do a lot of retouching very often, so we're by no means experts at it. Our goal here will be just to diminish some of the most offensive and distracting wrinkles. We'll use a combination of the clone stamp tool, the healing brush tools, and maybe some content aware fill to do the job. This is pretty time consuming, so let's speed on through it. For some more touch-ups, we can use frequency separation to fix problem areas while still keeping the fabric texture of the sheet intact. We'll start by pressing Command-J twice to make 2 additional copies of our layer. We'll go ahead and label the layers. Then, on the low frequency layer, we'll go to Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur. We want to adjust the blur amount so it will smooth things out without losing too much detail. Around 4.6 looks pretty good. On the high frequency layer, we'll go to Image, Apply Image. Under Layer, we'll choose our low frequency layer. For blending, we'll choose Subtract. We want Scale at 2 and Offset at 128, and then we'll click OK. We'll then change the layer blend mode to Linear Light. Now we have the hard lines and texture of the sheet on the high frequency layer and the color on a low frequency layer. We can use a clone stamp tool on the high frequency layer to remove the lines, and then go into the low frequency layer with the clone stamp or spot healing brush to fix the coloration. Well, that's a lot better. Let's take a look at some of our final images from the shoot.
Well, you did it. Assuming you've seen all 3 parts of the series, you're officially ready to tackle your own photo shoot.
The best time to start planning is right now while you're motivated, so we'll let you get to it.
If you've liked this series and want to see other creators teach videos on this channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on that pesky little notification bell.
And if you've never been to our channel, we'd love to see you over there.
Bye.
Bye.